Go on, no, why not? If you can stand it. There's a guy very keen to... Oh. Use the mic.
Want to raise the issue of what you term the fractious exit.
Yeah.
Because it seems to me that all the previous long waves ended not just with the restructuring of the economies, with the restructuring of social relations within countries, but with a redrawing of the world map, rivers of blood, even in some of the stages in oceans of blood.
Yeah.
And for 40 years now, I've been part of the far left, and people around me have been predicting that it's going to be the twilight of the gods next week, and the future belongs to us. Very similar arguments on the far right, and those arguments begin to pile after 3 or 4 decades. Plainly is stupid self-delusion to go into that, but it equally seems to me that the ending, as it were, the delayed ending in '89 was a partial example of that. In a third of the world, the boundaries were withdrawn for several years, demographic crisis and all the rest of it, but that it wasn't globally, and in particular it wasn't something that affected the previously dominant Western European and North American economies, and that is still ahead of us. It seems to me, as on the one hand, until it happens, it's the worst kind of fortune telling to predict it. But do you think that there is? It's not just economic deep waves we're still facing, but major social crises that you just hinted at.
Yeah. Well, let's make this the last one, and thanks for asking that, and hello. Okay. This is something Charles Kindleberger, the economic historian, wrote a brilliant book about the 30s, about the Depression, that I think still is the one that I always go back to. It's called The Great Depression. It's one of the Penguin Economic History series. And it's one that to your undergraduates or the school students here, once you can read it, it is worth a good look at. Because what he points out is that what you talk about, this political and diplomatic and ultimately military conflict that took place in the 30s, was a less than zero-sum game. When everybody devalued against each other, the world was worth less. Purchasing power was less. When they'd all imposed tariffs on each other, trade was less. When they imposed, the illusion of momentary advantage gained by economic competition of a cutthroat character was temporary, and that those who, indeed, the countries that were the first out of the blocks on both Keynesian reflationary and monetary competition, Japan and Germany, ultimately set off down a road that they lost in the long term. Now, Kindleberger writes, periods like this don't end until a power emerges in the world that's prepared to set standards of behaviour, take everybody's paper, literally be the clearinghouse for financial capital, set standards of behaviour, reorder the world in its image, in its own moral image, so that its own moral standards that it believes, its ruling elite believe are right, are imposed on the rest of the world. Kindleberger says the Depression only ends effectively because Britain had lost that position in the world, and America didn't want to or could not take it. And the moment when America begins to take that position, at the moment of its entry, it's not the rearmament, it's its entry into the war. Its ability to have debates like, okay, we've been planning for 10 years on a war in the Pacific. That's where our Navy is. We've just been attacked in the Pacific. What should we do? Right, let's attack in the Atlantic. That's what a global superpower does. Global superpowers can have rational debates like that. Okay, declining, ailing, failing ones can't have debates like that. There you go. We need an aircraft carrier. Oh no, let's have half of one. In fact, when we build it, let's sell it to somebody else. Yeah, that's what a failing power does. Okay, now the relevance of that to now is, of course, China, because China does not want to be that hegemonic power. It doesn't want to set standards of behaviour. It doesn't want to obey standards of behaviour, I would argue. It doesn't want to have much to do with the rest of the world in any offensive and shaping way, the way America and Britain in the 19th century did. It's quite happy to be a regional power. Even when it gets its aircraft carrier and its 6 that it's planning, they're basically aimed at at Southeast Asia. That's where they're aimed at. No, there's going to be all sorts of fractiousness, but I think the really interesting thing is that really what that then leaves you with is that the policymakers, the Davos, the group of 30, the elite of the world, the Bilderberg group, you know, what you hear when you talk to people, apart from most recently quite a lot of panic in that world, believe me, panic is, well, if we're not going to get a power that reshapes the world, and if America's financially, fiscally, declining, then the only hope is for multilateralism. And therefore, what you've got is an elite that is wedded to multilateralism. That is, to the OECD, to IMF, to the World Bank, to Basel III, whatever. They're wedded to various forms of benign collaboration. So the elites, the political elites, are locked together at the top. But then you know what the next line I'm going to say is. The problem is, in doing so, they become more and more detached from their own population. You can see it in Europe. The Euro elite locked into Europe. We don't want any reports from the IMF, says Olli Rehn this week, that say austerity doesn't work, because this is discouraging people from carrying out austerity. Even when the IMF economics department was saying, big sorry, we miscalculated. The impact was double what we thought it was going to be. So the danger in the world becomes less of a Hitler, a Roosevelt, a Stalin. It becomes less, actually. It becomes more that people take all kinds of strange subcutaneous routes to trying to achieve what in previous periods demagogic right or left-wing politicians would have done in the national interest. It's really that, for me, defines politics at the moment. It defines what I find in Greece, Spain, probably Italy, as the situation develops. In America also, people are kind of switched off from that politics. Now, some of you, will live to see the 21st century unfold over this next 50-year period. That's going to be the interesting question that probably defines the world you're in. Does that elite in some way become less multilateral, more defensive of its own backyard, or does it remain very heavily locked into the old system and it just loses its legitimacy? That, I can tell you, is what they are worried about.